Well, it started as a run-of-the-mill town hall meeting, but what happened next changed the course of America's healthcare debate and reshaped our politics.
This is about the systematic dismantling of this country. I'm only 35 years old. I have never been interested in politics. You have awakened the sleeping giant.
The woman you just saw joins us live next hour on the healthcare law that's now headed to the U.S. Supreme Court and what all of this means for the 2012 presidential race. Fox News alert just moments ago, Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi, when asked about the chances of the healthcare law surviving the Supreme Court challenge, said, quote, "This law has ironclad constitutionality," saying what happens in the court is another matter. Tomorrow marks 2 years to the day since President Obama signed the controversial bill into law. But back in August of 2009, months before that happened, Americans started to learn more about the law. And at the time, we saw a remarkable grassroots uprising, starting with, I remember it well, Bill Hemmer and I were on the air doing America's Newsroom, that we were told to cut to breaking news at an Arlen Specter town hall. We were only going to take a minute of it. An hour later, we came back on camera. Here's a bit.
Leave us alone. That's all we would ask. Would you leave us alone?
I see the things that my government is doing. They are not working for us. They are working against us.
We cannot afford this. Period. Keep the government out of it. We're doing just fine. Thank you, sir.
You want to be let out of here, you're welcome to go. Now, wait a minute. Wait a minute. You want to leave? Leave.
I am going to speak my mind before I leave because your people told me I could.
This is incredible for the United States of America. So the people in this room want their country back.
Yes, I'm angry. I'm an American citizen. I'm a voter. I'm a taxpayer. I don't like the fact that my elected officials are running around calling me un-American, a rabble-rouser, a mobster. With me. I'm sick of the lies. I don't like being lied to. I don't like being lied about. This administration is doing both of those things. Yes. Now, I want you, as my senator, to go back to Washington, D.C., and tell those people to do what the president said that I should do, is shut up and get out of the way.
It's not about left and right. This is about the systematic dismantling of this country. I'm only 35 years old. I have never been interested in politics. You have awakened the sleeping giant.
Wow. Joining us now, that woman you just heard at the end, Katy Abram, who attended that town hall back in 2009. Also here, Tracy Miller, who was a vocal participant at another town hall hosted by Democratic Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. And Tea Party Patriots co-founder Jenny Beth Martin is co-author of Tea Party Patriots and the Second American Revolution. Ladies, thank you all so much for being here. Let me start with you, Katy. I remember that so well. As I said in the introduction, Hemmer and I were sitting there. We're just going to take a sound bite. It was because it was getting contentious. Wait a minute, wait a minute. We went to take a bit. That turned out to be a seminal moment in the healthcare debate. Do you feel like you lost that debate?
Oh, absolutely not. You know, as the healthcare debate went on, you know, obviously we saw that this federal government chose not to listen to us. And as Nancy Pelosi said, if we can't go through the gate, we'll jump over the fence. If we can't jump over the fence, we'll parachute in. This showed the arrogance of Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, and the rest of this administration. In 2010, it was true, and we proved that this debate has not gone away and that we are a force to be reckoned with.
Tracy Miller, you went to this town hall with Sheila Jackson Lee, where she took a cell phone call in the middle and kept everybody who showed up to talk to her waiting. That became controversial. People took note. Did you get politically active at the time? Was it because of the health care bill?
I would say the health care bill made it personal for me, like it has for many Americans. When the government comes for your health care and wants to make decisions that impact your life and the lives of your family, that's personal. And so it did awaken a lot of people that were, before this, on the political sidelines.
Jenny, do you feel like the health care law spurred the Tea Party movement, in part?
Well, the Tea Party movement in the modern day form started before the healthcare legislation, but it definitely added fuel to the fire. People in America do not want the government to control our lives. They don't want it to control our health care. And this law is a complete and total overreach of the federal government.
Katie, the latest polls, this is an ABC News Washington Post poll, says Americans oppose this law now by 52 to 41%. 41% support it. 67% believe the high court should ditch this law, or at least the portion that requires people to have coverage, the mandate. 67% believe that's what should happen next week. Do you still have hopes that we're going to see this law eliminated, either by the U.S. Supreme Court, which could gut it, or in the next presidential election?
I pray that they do overturn this law, but the thing that concerns me is when we have justices on the Supreme Court that are ridiculing the Constitution in and of itself, that concerns me a lot. You know, we have to stand together. I know next Tuesday I'm going to be down in Washington, D.C., across from the Supreme Court with the Hands Off My Healthcare rally, and we are going to be standing one last time against this bill. And if this bill is not overturned in the Supreme Court, then we are going to have to focus our sights on Congress to repeal this bill themselves.
It's interesting to hear you saying that you're going to this rally next week. You weren't political before this, were you? I mean, you said you've awakened the sleeping giant. Now look at you. Why? Why does this touch such a core? And why did it touch such a core for those who were at that town hall?
You know what? Listening to the video that you played, I almost wanted to start crying because you felt the passion of everybody in that room. The last thing we want is the government to walk in through our front door and mandate that we have to have one product or another. I mean, you look at the federal government now. They would love nothing more than for all of us to drive a Chevy Volt. Look at what an awful car that is. Do you want your health care to be exactly like a Chevy Volt? I don't think so.
Tracy, you know, whenever you talk to Democrats about it, they say, look, the disapproval numbers of this health care law, it's not just Republicans. It's Democrats who wanted a bigger, bolder law, who wanted, you know, a government option and so on. Do you think that they accurately have their finger on the pulse of how Americans feel?
No, I don't. I see a lot of people turning to government for an answer to their problems right now, and healthcare is just one of the places that they're trying to solve problems. But I would say to someone who wants even more from the government and the taxpayer to pay for it, I haven't seen the government solve any problems. We've had governments all over the world trying to solve poverty for hundreds of years, and it's never happened. And our government is not going to solve health care, and we cannot even afford this. I think the bottom line is we can't afford it. So not only is it a personal decision between a doctor and a patient what type of care they're going to receive, instead of having a panel decide if you're eligible or not for that procedure, it's also a matter of we can't afford this. Yeah. We have an out-of-control spending spree going on in D.C., and it's unsustainable.
Jenny Beth, 37 Democratic House members who voted for health care were defeated when they ran for re-election. The president barely mentioned it in his State of the Union address. The majority of Americans oppose the law. 67% believe the high court should ditch it, and yet it may not. It may not, and this law may stand in this society. What are the lessons of that?
Well, when is the last time 70% of Americans agree on a political issue? You almost can't get that many Americans to agree on apple pie. Congress in Washington, D.C. need to listen, and they need to realize that Obamacare is a cancer in our government, and it's time to rip it out, and it's time to repeal this legislation now.
Props. She brought props. Listen, it's been interesting talking to you. We remember it well. We remember watching some of you at these town halls, and we thought now with the law going up to the Supreme Court for its final constitutional test, at least for now, we check back in. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fox News Alert, just 24 hours from the 2-year anniversary of the president's health care law, and the White House is hitting back at questions over what is supposed to be the president's signature achievement. Welcome to a brand new hour of America Live. I'm Megyn Kelly. Some tense responses from the White House in just the last 24 hours to questions about the health care law passed 2 years ago tomorrow. When asked why the president wasn't doing anything to mark the occasion, White House Press Secretary Jay Carney says, quote, I don't anticipate a presidential marking of an anniversary that only those who toil inside the Beltway focus on. And if I may, as a layman, take issue with the knuckle-headed reporting that suggests or buys the critique that we're somehow not proud of the accomplishment. But despite that pride, tomorrow you will not see the president before the cameras, or the vice president, or even the president's Health and Human Services secretary. Instead, you will see someone named Cecilia Munoz, the White House's director of the Domestic Policy Council, who will field questions about the law on Twitter. So you won't actually even see her. Chris Direwalt is our Fox News digital politics editor and host of Power Play on FoxNews.com. Because when you have something that you want to tout as your big accomplishment, you get Cecilia to go on Twitter late on a Friday afternoon when you're the White House.
Twitter's a very big deal, Megyn. You're on Twitter.
Follow me,
a lot
Megyn
of people
Kelly.
are on Twitter. Yeah, exactly. Twitter's a big deal.
Cecilia, follow me.
Look, the White House is obviously knows that it is the president's most significant accomplishment in his first term, but it's also probably his greatest political liability. It is the thing that he got done that no Democrat has been able to get done for all of these years, for 60 years, eluded Democrats, maybe even longer. The president was able to do that. That's something that liberals have wanted for a long time, a real national health law, and he did that. And if you remember, and think about the stark difference here, Megyn, the day that they signed that into law 2 years ago, it was an unprecedented signing ceremony in the White House, in the East Room of the White House, cheering, chanting, yes, we can. People gathered around. It was like a partisan pep rally. Now, 2 years later, it's Twitter with Cecilia, and it tells you how they miscalculate.
I don't know. We're having problems with interference on your mic or something like that, Chris. Maybe it's your BlackBerry. Chris can't talk now. I want to talk to you about it because according to Joe Biden, when this thing was passed, this was a big bleeping deal. 2 years later, Cecilia's going to handle it on Twitter. The president knows this is a political liability for him to some extent, as you point out. What does he do about it? Health care is in the news. There happens to be a little Supreme Court battle that's going up. So that's, late March into April. Then we're going to get a decision on the thing in June, which could be still in the news cycle around July. Is that enough time from November that this is going to be in the rear view?
Depends on what happens. If the Supreme Court upholds the law and Americans find that this thing is actually marching forward and it continues to be unpopular, one would think that these arguments will tend to make it more unpopular since most Americans in polls say that they think it's unconstitutional. If it is affirmed and goes forward, it's going to stand out as this giant liability for the president that he's going to eventually have to deal with. I think between now and the time that verdict's rendered, the idea is keep the left happy, remind them in a hushed voice, Soto voice, that it was done, but with the larger electorate, just try to steer around it as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you've got, in the 2010 midterms, you had 37 Democratic House members who voted for the health care law who were defeated. And right now, the latest ABC News Washington Post poll finds that Americans continue to oppose the law, 52 to 41%. 67% believe the high court should ditch the law, or at least part of it. Chris, thank you.
You bet.